NetsBoy, so let's hear what he has to say. His name is NetsBoy, he thinks the world is all over when the Nets just can't play.
What up, Net fans? NetsBoy here, bringing your latest in your Brooklyn Nets news. All right, let's go. Let's dive right in. We've got a lot to discuss and talk about in this episode because it's been a while since I've actually spoken about this Nets team because, you know, my last episode was my 200th, and I did a two-part episode about the top 10 worst Nets over the last 20 years, selected by yours truly. So I didn't really talk about what was going on with the Nets to start the second half of the season. So if you hadn't seen that episode, I recommend you check it out. It was very fun to do. It was a lot of yelling and frustration being, from me, talking about all these terrible Nets over the last 20 years. It was just a fun thing to do. So check that out if you hadn't. But, like I said, we now got to get back to business and talk about this Nets team as well as some of the moves that I think the Nets could try to do going into the trade deadline, which is just a couple days away. So a lot to discuss, a lot to talk about. So let's go. So first and foremost, the last 6 games, the Nets went 5-1. Great start to the second half of the season. It's exactly what I was hoping for. They had, a great win against the Celtics, hard-fought win against the Pistons, hard-fought win against the Knicks, which I'll talk a little bit more about that game. A great comeback win against the Pacers, a fluky loss against the Magic, and then once again a hard-fought grit and grind win against the Wizards. So a lot to talk about. But to me, the biggest takeaway from these last 6 games, there's a couple things. The first thing is what I was just basically saying. All these wins, except for the Celtics game, were hard-fought, grit and grindy wins. The Nets did not play great in all these games. They just managed to battle and be able to make the right plays when they needed to and came out on top. The Magic game was just fluky. I mean, the Magic couldn't miss that game. Aaron Gordon was making shots I've never seen him make in the history of his career. You just have to chalk that up to just a fluke. The Nets, nothing was going right for the Nets. Everything was going right for the Magic. It happens. You can't expect the Nets to win every game. So I wasn't that upset. But I loved what I saw from the Nets in all those other wins, especially that Pacers win without Kyrie Irving, who's dealing with a hip injury. To see him, the James Harden-led Nets come back in that game down by, I think, 15 or 16 points or 20, and come back and win was unbelievably impressive. Great performances from a lot of players, especially my friend Nicholas Claxton. I loved what I saw from this Nets team. And like I said, grind-out win against the Pistons, grind-out win against the comeback win against the Pacers, controversial win against the Knicks. And listen, that was a travel, okay? And the NBA eventually clarified. Everyone got the clarification. That was a travel on Julius Randle. Kyrie touched the ball, but he didn't lose the ball, Randle did, and then he landed after he jumped up. That's a travel. It's the rules of basketball. So the Knicks didn't get screwed out of a win, okay? And that was the narrative that everyone was talking about because that's what always happens with the Knicks. The Knicks got screwed out of a win. What a terrible circumstances. Poor Knicks. There's always something screwing the Knicks over. These Nets, they don't deserve for the success they have. They don't deserve to win that game. They don't deserve James Harden and Kyrie and Katie. And they don't Blake Griffin. They don't deserve all this greatness. The Knicks deserve everything. They got screwed. Like, that's what every Knicks fan was saying after that game. And that's what drives me nuts about Knicks fans. The world doesn't evolve around you. You are a 500 team, okay? Good for you. You came back in that game and battled hard. You're a hard-fought, entertaining team. You don't give up. That's great. That's good. You're going to be, a playoff team. You really should be. Yes, Julius Randle's having a great year. Yes, Emmanuel Quickley looks legit. Yes, R.J. Barrett is taking his game to the next level. Good, Knicks. Stop acting like you're the greatest thing in the world. I mean, that was the narrative, was that the Knicks got screwed and the Nets stole the game. I mean, first of all, the play prior when Joe Harris got fouled and they overturned it, I don't know that. That doesn't make sense to me. Emmanuel Quickley clearly hit Joe Harris in the shoulder, made him lose the ball. That was a foul. that was just some beneficial Nick bullcrap right there, right off the bat. But no one really complained about that, even though I saw it. I was almost convinced. I'm like, how? How they overturn that? And then to cry about Julius Randle, getting caught on the travel. And like I said, that was the narrative. That's the arrogance of Knicks fans. It's why I don't like Knicks fans. They somehow have to twist everything and victimize themselves, make them seem like, that they got screwed, that they're, that how could, like, remember, when Kyrie and Katie came to the Knicks, how could they pick the Nets over the Knicks? We're the greatest. How could this Knicks team get screwed when they came back against the Nets and came back when they were down 10 with like 2 minutes to go? We can't allow this to happen. There has to be something. It has to be rigged. Everything has to be rigged. Like excuse after excuse, Knicks fans. You guys are playing well. You're an entertaining team. You play hard. You know where the Knicks are? They're where the Nets were 2 years ago when the Nets went 41-41 and made the playoffs as the 6th seed. That's where the Knicks are. So calm down there, Knicks fans. Your team's good, but not great. You guys battle hard. Stop making excuses. Just embrace and appreciate the fact your team's not the laughingstock of the league anymore. Sorry. I just get so frustrated because instead of congratulating the Nets on a hard-fought win, everyone was talking about how the Knicks got screwed, and he didn't get screwed. But either way, hard-fought win right there for the Nets. Following that up again then with a hard-fought win against the Pacers. We talked about that. We talked about the hard-fought wins. Enough with that. The other thing to take away over the last 6 games was the debut of Blake Griffin, who played in that Wizards game. He played 15 minutes, was 1 of 2, with a dunk, which everyone loved. He had a block. He drew a charge. He just looked good. And I'm very pleased with what I've seen from Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin was on a couple years ago, my top 5 most overrated players in the NBA today. I had a list like 2 or 3 years ago, and Blake Griffin was on that list. And that's because he really was. Blake Griffin, to me, was never that superstar, was never that star player. He was just a really good player who was an all-star, but nothing more than that. And everyone tried to make him out to be like the next greatest player, but I never saw it. And he was on my most overrated player list. Well, this version of Blake Griffin, the role player, veteran Blake Griffin, I really like. I loved what I saw from him. It was only 15 minutes, but he looked energized. He had energy. He made the right play. He didn't force shots. He was a good playmaker, distributor. Like I said, he blocked a shot. He drew a charge. He looked good. I like this version of Blake Griffin. I do. I'm really liking the pickup now, seeing what I got to see from him. But besides the fact that Blake Griffin looked pretty decent in his debut, the other takeaway is Nicholas Claxton played 26 minutes in that Wizards game and also played down the end of the game, down the stretch of both the Wizards game and the Magic and the Pacers game. I love it. Remember, one of the things I was worried about with Blake Griffin was what's going to happen in this rotation. Is Blake Griffin going to take Nicholas Claxton's minutes? Nope. Thank goodness Steve Nash understood the value of Nicholas Claxton. Claxton played 26. DeAndre Jordan played 17. Griffin played 15. Love it. Look, DeAndre Jordan is the guy who should be getting less minutes now with Blake Griffin in the mix. It's just the reality of it. Claxton's a better player than Jordan, all right? Claxton is a better defensive player with his lateral quickness, can guard on the ball and switch and guard smaller players. He can block shots. He's a better offensive player. The only thing that he's not as good as Jordan is he's extremely too weak compared to Jordan. He just doesn't have the strength yet, and he's not as good of a rebounder, which has to do, once again, with strength, because Claxton doesn't have the strength to deal with the big bodies. But everything else about Claxton is just much better than Jordan. And like I said, I was fearful because we all know how DeAndre Jordan is best friends with the superstars and how, Steve Nash, and the Nets have catered to the superstars. But Nash is making the right decision. Let Claxton play the bulk of the minutes. Use Jordan when you need him against bigger bodies and you need a rebound. And let Blake Griffin play the small ball 5. I love what I'm seeing from it. So that's the other takeaway I took from these last couple games. And I loved it. And so Claxton's playing a lot. He had some big plays down the stretch. Jordan is contributing the way he should as a 15 to 20 minutes a game role player. Same thing with Blake, 15 to 20 minutes. That's what it should be with this Nets team. So a 5-1 start to the second half of the season, which has been great. Obviously, some bad news. Landry Shaman with the ankle injury against the Wizards. He's going to miss a couple weeks. That's a tough blow. Shaman has been playing so well of late. He was finally no longer on my I hate you list, and now he rolls his ankle, and who knows what's going to happen after that. We'll have to see who will step in. Maybe Tyler Johnson will get more minutes. Maybe Luau Cabarro will get an opportunity again. We'll see what happens there. And also, the next couple of games for the Nets, they won't have Kyrie Irving, who's dealing with a family matter. So he will not be traveling with the team on the West Coast trip, which is going to be a big deal because those next couple games for the Nets on the West Coast are going to be very tough. But we're going to talk about it in a second. I now want to quickly pivot and talk about the trade deadline, which, as I mentioned, is just a couple days away on March 25th. The Nets have pretty much set themselves up to be more players in the buyout market, but we all heard the rumors. The Nets are shopping, Spencer Dinwiddie. And I think that makes tons of sense. Spencer Dinwiddie's most likely not going to play this year, and if he does come back, he's going to be limited, and he just doesn't really fit on this team. With the acquisition of James Harden and having Kyrie Irving as well, another ball-dominant playmaking guard just doesn't really fit, and that's the reality of it. And I love Spencer Dinwiddie. I've loved him from the first time I ever said, who the hell is Spencer Dinwiddie? But I think his days on the Nets are numbered. And if he doesn't get traded now, he's not going to come back to the Nets. He has an option to opt out at the end of this year. He probably will. And I feel like the Nets are probably going to trade him. So he's the only one I really see the Nets trading. They're not going to trade DeAndre Jordan. They better not trade Nicholas Claxton, which I've heard some rumors about that. And I swear to God, Sean Marks, if you trade Nicholas Claxton, I'm going to throw the biggest temper tantrum you've ever seen. Bigger than that James Harden temper tantrum I threw earlier this year. I don't see them trading, Shamet or Luau Cabarro or some of these other Jeffrey. I don't see it. I really think it's just going to be Dinwiddie. And what the Nets have said that they're looking for is a role player who can contribute now and a second-round pick for Dinwiddie. So I started looking at, some possible trades that the Nets might do, and I came across a couple of them. The biggest one that I would love to see the Nets do is trade Spencer Dinwiddie for J.J. Redick, straight up or add a second-round pick. J.J. Redick is having an off year this year. He hasn't played nearly as well as he's played in the past. He is older. I think he's 35 years old, 36 years old. But make no doubt, he is still one of the best shooters in the game. And you put J.J. Redick on this Nets team with Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Kevin Durant, he'll just need to spot up and knock down shots just like Joe Harris. And I've said it before, what if you had Joe Harris and J.J. Redick just running around shooting threes? It would be great. I would love to see that move. And it works contractually. One up for each other. And why wouldn't the Pelicans make that trade? Lonzo Ball doesn't seem like he's the future. And how great would it be if the Pelicans got Dinwiddie, signed him to an extension with the bird rights, which is the whole reason why teams are trying to trade for Dinwiddie, is to use his bird rights to sign him to an extension. And then you've got one of the best young cores you can get of Dinwiddie, Brandon Ingram, and Zion Williamson, and you build from there. That would be great for the Pelicans. So I think that's a win-win move. That's my number one move I would love to see. Dinwiddie for J.J. Redick, and if the Pelicans want to throw a second-round draft pick in the mix, they should go ahead and do it. And I would love to see J.J. Redick, who wants to be playing for the Nets or the Knicks because he lives in the area. It would be great. That would be a great move. So that's my number one move I want to see, Dinwiddie for J.J. Redick. Another one I would like to see, and I heard some rumors about this, is Dinwiddie for Mason Plumley. Now, the Pistons want Dinwiddie, and Mason Plumley, the former Net, that would be a great move. This would be a move I would like to see the Nets do if they really don't think they'll be able to get a center like JaVale McGee or Andre Drummond in the buyout market. JaVale McGee said he doesn't want to get bought out, so maybe not. But this is a move that I would do if Sean Marks is hearing from the grapevines that they may not be able to land those guys. I think that would be a great move. I think Mason Plumlee will be a perfect fit as another big. He's having a great year. He can block shots, run the floor, rebound, another lob threat. We saw what he was like when he played with the Nets earlier in his career. Just a really good player. I love that. I love that move, especially if the Nets get a draft pick in it as well. Don't get me wrong. Talent-wise, Dinwiddie's a much better player, but we're talking about an injured player who may not play this year and could still walk and maybe not even want to sign an extension, especially with the Pistons, because Dinwiddie has a little grudge against the Pistons since he started his career with the Pistons, but they got rid of him. So I'm all for it. So that's another move I heard. Mason Plumley for Dinwiddie, bringing a second-round draft pick. Plumley will fit in perfectly as another big body for this Nets team. So that's one that I've heard. Obviously, I've heard about the Nets maybe trading for JaVale McGee since he doesn't want to get bought out. No, don't trade for JaVale McGee. If you're going to trade for a center, trade for Plumley, okay? Don't trade for JaVale McGee. JaVale McGee is only if he gets bought out. Same thing with Drummond. Drummond, I don't think the Nets could possibly trade without including Joe Harris's contract. They would have to trade like Dinwiddie, Joe Harris, and DeAndre Jordan to trade for him. So that's not going to happen for Drummond. But if Drummond hits the buyout market, I would love to see him come to the Nets. And then there's rumors about Kevin Love being bought out. That would be hysterical if the Nets could land him. I would laugh so hard. So there's a lot of things out there. But the biggest trades that I've been seeing and I've been hearing is Mason Plumlee or J.J. Redick. There's a few other possibilities out there, but to me, those are the most likely and the ones that I would like to see the most. That being said, as long as the Nets do get a quality role player and a draft pick for Dinwiddie, I think trading him is the best option at this point. But I don't want the Nets to do anything stupid and trade Nicholas Claxton because that's just dumb. But those are the two moves I would make, and that's what I would try to do if I'm the Nets, is bring in either another solid big or a solid role player, maybe another point guard, because, like, I mean, we haven't seen Chris Chiozza play recently, but, like, not having Kyrie Irving and relying so much on James Harden, you know, the Nets could use another point guard. Chris Chiozza is, to me, the answer, but, like, personally, James Harden is playing so many minutes. I would almost rather see the Nets cut Harden's minutes from like 40 that there are to 38 and give Chiozza a chance. Or maybe trade for another like decent rotational point guard who can play on and off the ball. A guy like, I mention him all the time, Patty Mills. That's another guy I would love to see the Nets trade Dinwiddie for Patty Mills. I don't know if that would happen, but Patty Mills will fit perfectly on this Nets team as well. A guy who can play on and off the ball. He can be a third string emergency point guard when Kyrie gets hurt or deals with personal issues like he is now. Spell some minutes for James Harden, maybe rest. Like you know what I mean? Like Patty Mills is someone else that fits that mold. So I would love to see that. As long as the Nets make a smart move with Dinwiddie, that's all I care about. Just don't trade Claxton. So that's what's going to happen moving forward. And maybe we'll address the buyout market on my next episode. But as long as they get somebody to add to this team, I'll be happy. Now let's look at the next couple games for the Nets. As mentioned before, they're not going to have Kyrie Irving the next couple games, and that's going to be an issue because, wow, this is going to be tough. They're going on a West Coast road trip against the Trail Blazers, the Jazz, and the Pistons. Trail Blazers and Jazz, that's probably going to be a loss. As much as I love James Harden playing the way he's playing with James Harden and the gang, I just don't think that they're going to be able to beat the Trail Blazers, who are like one of the top teams in the Western Conference. Damian Lillard is playing like an MVP. And then they're playing the best team in the West, the Jazz. I'll be surprised if the Nets win those games without Kyrie Irving. I think they're going to lose both those games. But then they got the Pistons, who the Nets should be able to beat, but we know that they lost to them earlier this year, and they barely were able to beat them recently. But even without Kyrie, I want to believe they should be able to win that game. So on this small West Coast trip, I think 1 and 2 is what the Nets are going to do. Anything better than that, I'll be very happy about. But I think 1 and 2 the next 3 games is pretty much what they're most likely going to do. But then they've got some winnable games after that, and when they go back home against the Timberwolves, the Rockets, and then the Hornets. Those are 3 very winnable games, and I expect them to win those games, especially since Kyrie Irving is supposed to be back. And who knows? You might see Kevin Durant come back for those games because the rumors are he might be back in another week or two, and that would be fantastic to see. And Who knows what other players will be on this Nets team by then, because that'll be after the trade deadline and after the buyout market. So exciting to see what happens. Overall, the next 6 games, I expect the Nets to go at least 4-2, possibly 3-3, but I expect 4-2. Anything better will be great. But look, can't complain. Can't complain about a lot with this Nets team. Been very happy and very pleased. And yeah, so there you go. Let's wrap up this episode. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys think about how the Nets played recently. About, what you saw from Blake Griffin, the fact that Nicholas Claxton is getting the bulk of the center minutes now. Some players you think the Nets should try to go after, whether it's via trade or buyout. And what you think could happen the next couple games with this Nets team without Kyrie Irving the next 3, without Landry Shaman, and a tough road trip ahead. So let me know what you guys think. And until then, this is NetsBoy, still feeling very good about this Nets team and getting ready for an extended run of hopefully success. And until then, this is NetsBoy, signing off.
When the Nets just